The Flesh and False God series is my adult fantasy debut, and it's inspired by Antony and Cleopatra, more in the way of Antony and Cleopatra, the Shakespearean characters, than Antony and Cleopatra, the full play. And what I mean by that is it is so deeply a character study of some terrible, terrible people. And the reason why it is a trilogy is because the idea of power and how it really corrupts someone and what they thought they were going to start out with, it's such a core focus of the book. And the moment I had the idea for, something that is Antony and Cleopatra of a sense, I knew that I wanted to pivot and make it an adult fantasy series. And it's because there have been many academic papers that have compared Romeo and Juliet to Antony and Cleopatra. They are both these star-crossed lovers, on opposite sides of some sort of factional clash. However, Romeo and Juliet is such a, tale of youths. They are not in control of their star-crossed nature. They cannot change anything about that scenario. They are just in that trap because the adults around them have put them in that trap. And the ending of Romeo and Juliet is essentially them removing themselves from that situation by choosing to die together instead. Antony and Cleopatra is fascinating because, in contrast, it is about adults. They are star-crossed because they've chosen to be on opposite sides of their goals, their motivations, and the power they want. At any point in time, Antony and Cleopatra can just say, no, I don't want to fight the war anymore. Let's just go live somewhere happily and spend our time together. But they don't. And I really wanted to explore that, I guess, in a very meta way to what I've already done in the young adult space for Romeo and Juliet. I thought it's a great idea to have these Violent Delights be my young adult debut. And now book one of Flesh and False Gods, Immortal Longings, being my adult debut. And now that is about Antony and Cleopatra in this urban fantasy space that is inspired by the Kowloon walled city that stood in Hong Kong in the 1990s, merged with the rise of the Roman Empire. So they're two very, very different settings. But I think the fun of fantasy is that I get to build my own rules. So I said, let me just merge these things together and see what comes out of it. So in the world of Immortal Longings, people can swap bodies like they swap clothes. It is just a genetic trait that a lot of people in the world have. And it plays into these annual games that their king holds, where if you are drawn in the lottery, you join 87 other players to essentially slaughter each other until there's one victor left who just gets a insane amount of money. And it really is only in this world that these games and this sort of body jumping system is allowed to thrive. There are so many people in the capital that 87 deaths means nothing to them. It is entertainment that crosses their newsreels every night when they're watching the updates. And body jumping is something that really serves to emphasize this idea of, when there are so many people like that, one body is a statistic. It's not a person anymore. These are just numbers, and they become pests of a sort. And it's in this environment that Kella, the main character, starts with a very righteous goal. She wants to kill the king. She wants to make things better. And she thinks if she puts her cousin, August, who is the crown prince, on the throne, he's going to make things better. And the more she goes through the games, the more she is killing people in order to get an audience with the king. She wants to win the games. The king is this little, tyrant who stays in his palace all day and only comes out to greet the victor of the games. She's thinking, if I just get to the end, if I just kill him, everything's going to be fine. We're going to be great. And the more she goes through this, the more she's actually interacting with August, who is wanting to take power, the more it's questioned in this first book. Can you fix a world like this? Can you fix a society like this by just swapping kings? Or are you just inevitably exchanging one tyrant for another? And since book 2 and book 3 aren't out yet, I'm trying to be sneaky about the way I talk about it, but it is very much a it's very much an investigation about the corruption of power, the, the institution, and how nothing is ever overthrown unless you overthrow everything, not just the figurehead. The shocking thing about Immortal Longings is that I actually think it's my shortest book, which is, it was very bizarre to me because more often than not, adult books tend to be longer than young adult. My young adult books are like 500 page like behemoths, and Immortal Longings came out to maybe 300, like the latter end of 300-ish pages. And when I thought about it, I was like, that actually makes sense because there are only really 3 characters in Immortal Longings, whereas like Foul Lady Fortune is like 7. Immortal Longings follows Calla, Anton, and August. And of course, there are other point of views that come in like as needed, but it is about these 3. And it is about how they want the same things, and yet only one of them can ever really be getting everything they desire. So we have Calla and Anton, who are both trying to win the games. Calla needs to win the games if she's going to get an audience with the king. Anton needs to win the games because he needs money. He is in such deep debt because his childhood love, Otta, has been in a coma for 7 years. And if he doesn't pay those bills, they're throwing her body out. That's how callous they are about people in this world. Neither of them can get what they want if the other remains alive. At the end of the day, I think the sword is also so fun about death games, which sounds psychotic of me to say, but like, bear with me. They know this entire time, they know that only one person can win. And yet they stay allied for the better part of the games. They think we're going to get to the end faster if we team up. And they just push it out of their minds until push comes to shove. And the pusher is August because he needs the king dead if he's going to rise up and become the king. And of course, everything that Calla wants, right? No longer people living in the squalor, like people actually being respected of some sort. August claims to want change, but at the end of the day, he wants that throne more than anything. And so as we're moving into book 2, it is this increasing clash between Calla and August and what they want and what they can see. There's this clash between Calla and Anton because Anton's, well, I won't spoil how Immortal Longings ends, but one of them is going to be pissed, right? One of them is going to have to try to kill the other. And of course, Anton and August were also once close friends until some things happened that drove them apart. So it's just, I love mess. I love power plays. I love characters stabbing each other in the back. And the series, this whole book, it's all about that. Vilest Things is one of the hardest books I've ever written, and I think it's because it's the first book 2 of a trilogy I have written for publication. It went through so many rewrites because I needed to get the dynamics right. And there are so many dynamics that I'm so excited for the readers to encounter. One of the main ones is at the start of Vilest Things. Well, actually, at the end of Immortal Longings, Otta Avia awakens, who is Anton's first love. And so she becomes a pretty critical character in Vilest Things to basically stir the pot. The dynamic between Otta, Calla, and Anton was one of the most fun things I have ever written because it feels like a love triangle. It feels like it should be a love triangle. Calla and Otta are mostly fighting over who gets Anton, but then you just look slightly beneath the layer and they're not actually fighting over Anton. They're fighting over who gets power and who gets the power he comes with. There are certain scenes where Anton is just witnessing these 2 women snipe at each other and he's like, they're fighting over me, and yet it's like I'm not even in the room. What is this? What is happening here? It's so much fun. It's like, I throw feminism out the window in a way, and yet I think women being toxic really makes the best feminism at the end of it in a meta way. When I think about world building, I try to think about what is it that the characters feasibly know, because I think I trip myself up a lot by world building too much in my head and not actually needing it on the page. especially when it comes to really, really niche things. Like in book one, I had to go through and delete every mention of the word satellite because I realized if they have satellites, have they been to space? And if they've been to space, why would they have rockets but not running cars in the city? So there's just a lot that you start rabbit holing down the moment you think of things. And my rule to myself, I suppose, especially when expanding the world in a series, like in Vilest Things, the moment they're traveling outward, I'm thinking, what is it that the character actually needs to know here? And what is it that they would naturally encounter as the people around them are talking about it? I kind of just observe, like, what am I hearing when I just walk out, like, to get a cup of coffee? Like, what are people talking about through my air? Or, like, what is it? How is context picked up? That way you kind of avoid the like unnecessary facts about the next province over just because it's interesting.